Call the March 5th, 2018 Davie County Commissioners meeting to order. This time I'll ask Commissioner Jones to do the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity tonight to come here and do the business of this wonderful county that you've placed us in. Father, we thank you for your mercy, your grace, and your goodness. We thank you for instilling in the hearts of men and women the desire and the call to serve on battlefields that we might be free. Father, to call men and women to be in our police, our fire, our EMS. Father, that they would protect us and keep our streets and our communities safe. Father, we thank you for the freedom that you've given us here in this greatest of all free lands. And so, Lord, we come here tonight seeking your wisdom, your mercy, your grace, and your will to be done among us. And Father, I pray for the leadership of this board in this county. I pray for each of our employees that you bless them and their families in mighty and powerful ways. And we pray this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.
You will stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. At this time, entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Wisecarver. All in favor, raise your hand. That is approved. All right, next we go to the public comment period. Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, no one has signed up tonight.
All right, thank you. All right, next we move to public hearings. We have 3 of those this evening. I will call on Mr. Meadwell and Mr. Gallimore.
Mr. Chairman, I think one of the first public hearings on your agenda tonight is the zoning map amendment.
Correct.
If the police board will do that one first. Mr. Chairman, before you tonight you have zoning map amendment 0118. This is a request to rezone 2.54 acres from residential agricultural to highway business. The subject property is located at 2914 U.S. Highway North, just north of Happy Trail, and is further described as Davie County Tax Parcel F37802. The applicant is J. Chris Culler. The subject piece of property was originally zoned in 1973 as residential agricultural. The proposed zoning district, highway business, is established principally for retail operations that are located on the roadways throughout the county. Public utilities, public water is available to the site, but sewer is not. So the site would have to be served by on-site septic. Highway 601 is a 60-foot right-of-way with 2 12-foot lanes, and it currently accommodates an average daily traffic count of 6,900 vehicles. The Davie County Land Development Plan designates this area as rural residential. This district outlines the predominant land uses would be rural activities, including farming, rural commercial businesses, and limited residential development. The property is also located in the secondary growth area. Issues to consider for the board tonight: if the board cannot consider any specific use of the property, but should consider all those uses that are allowed within the highway business zoning district. This rezoning request comes to you as a general use rezoning. Issues to consider: 1, the property's potential as a commercial use, the property's potential as a residential use, the property's location along a major arterial. If the zoning is approved, any new structures or use of the property would have to go through our development review process to ensure that it meets our development standards for a commercial type operation. Whether the proposed classification is consistent with the purposes, goals, objectives, and policies of adopted plans for the area, and whether the proposed reclassification is consistent with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. The planning board heard this at its January 23rd meeting and voted by a vote of 7-0 unanimously to approve. Board actions tonight by you The board should consider one of the following actions. Either move that the following statement be adopted in support of a motion to approve. The amendment promotes public health, safety, and general welfare, is consistent with all applicable adopted plans, and considers the action to be reasonable in the public interest. The said approval furthers the goals, objectives, and actions and policies of the land development plan and growth and enhancement strategy, because it is in harmony with the surrounding area and land uses, and fits within the land use plans as it integrates within the land use fabric of the county by limiting rural areas to generally accepted commercial uses, and it's in the vicinity of commercially zoned property and should not exceed existing road capacity. 2, move that the following statement be adopted in support to deny, and I've included some of those reasons why you can deny, but based on what you hear tonight from the public hearing, you may want to add to those, or 3, defer for additional consideration. Subject property has been duly advertised, posted. We have sent notice into the Davie Enterprise for this meeting, as well as sending notices out to all those surrounding property owners. We have not heard anyone call in to inquire or protest or just ask any kind of questions about this recently. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll entertain any questions that the board may have regarding this request.
Mr. Meadwell, at the time it goes before your board review, if this should pass tonight, is that the point where you do the buffer zones?
Correct. We'll look at a slew of different landscaping being one of those, being there adjacent to the property. If you look at the property, it's to the north. It's already fairly wooded and vegetation in and around. So there would be some supplemental type landscaping that would be required for structures and things like that.
According to what was going there?
Yeah, the current zoning ordinance.
Right.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Meadwell? Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
Chairman has announced this is the date and hour for the public hearing on the proposal to modify Chapter 155 of North Carolina zoning ordinance to rezone parcel F3 7802 owned by J. Chris Culler from residential agricultural to highway business. There has been due publication of notice of the public hearing in newspaper with general circulation in Davie County as required by North Carolina statutes. And the clerk of the board has attached the affidavit showing the publication and the date at least 10 days prior to today's date. I would ask that all who wish to comment on this public hearing come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Mr. Chairman, seeing no one come forward to comment, I would now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair so that you may close the public comment section of this public hearing and provide you all the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what action, if any, you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this point, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Any discussion, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the rezoning, raise your hand. Carries 5-0. Thank you. Next is a zoning text amendment.
And Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the board, you have 2 amendments. One is a text amendment to Chapter 155.170 of the zoning ordinance, and a ordinance amendment to Chapter 94 street and road name. Each of these should be, we're going to present both at the same time because each coincide with each other. We can't have one amendment without the other. However, when it comes time to vote, these will require 2 separate votes, two separate hearings and 2 separate votes. The reason why staff is bringing these 2 amendments to you tonight is to, one, better clarify and streamline the process for street road name. If the board recalls that the current process is an applicant fills out a road naming application. This is generally due to a property being subdivided and or someone has applied for a building permit on a private easement, which has triggered the exceeding the number of allowed homes to be on the easement. The petition is forwarded to the planning board the planning board makes a recommendation. The recommendation comes to you guys, and then you are the ultimate decision. Lots of times, these are heated type discussions. Lots of times the public or those involved, they don't pay attention to the planning board notice. They show up here not really knowing. So the intent of the amendment is to streamline that process, to bring this review process more in-house. And what the amendment proposes is through the zoning ordinance is to allow the technical review committee to review these applications. Applications will be made through the planning department. We're already, the Development Services Department's already seen those applications for building permits. We're already seeing those applications for subdivision of property. We can already see that there's going to be a need or request for these at the front end instead of waiting to the very end of the process when somebody's having to wait to get an address. They were having to come to you guys to get that approval for that said road name. So the process is that this TRC, which stands for the Technical Review Committee, this would replace our Project Review Committee. A lot of the same functions, however, we would add those other various groups, county departments, EMS, Fire and Rescue, Sheriff's Office if needed, but definitely, planning, zoning, utilities would be included. So throughout our development process, the TRC committee would be responsible for hearing and naming these roads. But we've also created a check valve in that as well, is that if an applicant is not happy with that determination by the TRC, they have that ability to go to the planning board to hear an appeal of that decision. The planning board is well suited to hear that. I think that when we looked at a lot of these road naming petitions, the planning board was really bored and was really kind of hashing out some of the issues there between property owners. So there is a valve there to catch those if someone is not happy. If they're not happy with the planning board decision, then they will have to cross the street to file there with the board system. So what you see, there are two separate text amendments. One establishing the TRC and the subdivision or the zoning ordinance, and then you have the amendment to Chapter 94, which is street and road naming. All the road naming responsibilities will fall with the TRC and or planning board now. The only road names that will not fall, or any of the issues dealing with state roads, would be road closings, road abandonments, or if there's an actual road name that is already considered a NCDOT street. By statute, those requests still have to come to you. So we haven't had that many in the past, so I don't see that those are going to change. That regularity coming to you guys probably will not change. So the planning board heard both of these requests and voted unanimously to approve both. So staff would ask the same. So,
Andrew did a great job with the explanation. I just want to add that this really brings the ordinance, addressing ordinance, more in line with the general statute that really defines the subdivision process and the public state road naming process. So we're trying to bring it in line and simplify the process somewhat, streamline it, so that we can deal with this more of an administrative matter. It is updating some definitions. We found a little bit of confusion and ambiguity in how we administer that ordinance. And then it's, as Andrew mentioned, it's really helping the public move on through the process quicker because we're dealing with it up at the front end as opposed to the back end when the house is already built or whatever they're doing with the property. So it's really about being more responsive and helping the public get through the process better.
and the streamlining that John mentioned here is that during the subdivision process, we would require that the road name actually be put on the subdivision plan. So, for instance, if I subdivide the property and I sell a lot to John, then I sell a lot to Mark. Well, Mark, you would trigger the road naming, and then you have 3 people involved with trying to name that road. Whereas at the very beginning of the process, if I subdivide it, I get to choose what that name is instead of getting all 3 people involved in that. So it really streamlines that process. So I think this is something that is needed, and as John mentioned, will really help with the public in the sense that they were waiting 60, 75 days to get road naming approval for various streets. So, Mr. I'll turn it back over to you unless the board has some questions.
No, it sounds like a good idea to me, but see what the public has to say. Any other questions for Mr. Meadwell and Mr. Gallimore?
Just for transparency's sake and for the folks that are here, how is the technical review committee appointed? And
It is made up of various county department agencies.
it is established in the ordinance.
Not specifically, not by name. And we discussed whether or not we should mention, for example, fire marshal, right? That's now under emergency management now. We don't have that position now, where if the planning director name changed to someone else, we wouldn't have those in there. So those county departments would be invited. It could be that some county departments would not need to be invited to those meetings because they would not have an impact or would not have a response to the request. So it's just open to all those various county departments that are typically part of our development process.
So would the technical review committee have a standing meeting every
We do.
month? You're going to have that meeting?
That meeting is the 3rd Thursday of each month.
And they'll just review whatever's got in the hopper that time?
What is submitted by the first day of the same month.
Are you familiar with what other counties around us do with this procedure?
We did poll several other counties, and it was, what we found was that they handled this process differently and than each other county. So there wasn't any real set responsibility. Some followed strictly by statute, which they wanted the county commissioners to do all the road naming. Some counties left it up kind of to what we're doing. Some counties just left it strictly with the planning department. They're the ones that approve subdivision. So there wasn't really any consistency across the state with that.
Well, I'm all for making it more efficient for our residents. That's the main issue, I think, here.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I may want to add, these gentlemen have been at work at this for several months. You may recall last year, we had a few requests come in, and some of you asked questions about how can we simplify, streamline this process, make it easier for the consumer, but also this board. We had the planning board and several of our departments who are involved in this process, and since that time, we've been doing this research and preparing for it tonight. So I want to commend Mr. Gallimore and Mr. Meadwell for that, but also the questions that you asked that kind of prompted this process and for us to start beginning working on this internally. We've done a lot of homework in preparing for tonight. As Mr. Ferguson asked, we did compare ourselves to others, but we think for Davie County, this is the best thing for the consumers as well as for this board in the structures that we've got to achieve the efficiency that we're looking for.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, thanks, guys. All right, I know we got to vote on these separate, but I guess we need to have 2 public hearings.
Mr. Chairman, we'll have a public hearing on 94 and then a public hearing on 155, and then you can vote on both of them separately after the 2 public hearings, or we can have a public hearing on one and then do the vote, and then a public hearing on the other one, then do whichever you choose to do. So the chairman has announced this is the date and hour for the public hearing on the proposal to modify Chapter 94 as to road naming processes. There has been due publication and notice of public hearing in the newspaper with general circulation in Davie County as required by law, and the clerk board has attached the affidavit showing the affidavit in said paper on a date at least 10 days prior to today's meeting. I would ask anyone who wishes to come forward to comment on the public hearing with regards to Chapter 94, do so, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Seeing no one coming forward, Mr. Chairman, to comment, I would now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair, closing the public comment section of this public hearing. So you might close the public comment section and provide the board the opportunity to discuss among yourself what action, if any, you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Okay, thank you. I guess, given it's on the agendas, 3 different public hearings, we'll
Yeah.
take one public hearing, vote on it, and then go to the 3rd one. So, all right, does anyone have any questions or input for, we actually dealing with Chapter 94, the street and naming text amendment now, so.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Have a motion, have a
Second.
second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that one passes. All right, so now we'll go to the public hearing on Section 155.
Mr. Chairman, the chairman has now announced the date and hour for public hearing as proposed to modify Chapter 155 of North Carolina of Davie County zoning ordinance as to project review processes. There has been a due publication notice of the public hearing in a paper with general circulation in Davie County as required by North Carolina general statutes. Clerk of the board has attached the affidavit showing that publication on a date at least 10 days prior to the date of this hearing. I would ask anyone who wishes to come forward to comment as to the Chapter 155 Davie County zoning ordinance as project review process to come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Mr. Chairman, seeing no one coming forward, I will now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair, so you may close the public comment section of this public hearing, provide the board the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will declare the public hearing closed, and anybody have any input or comments on Section 155 text amendment? To Mr. Beadwell and Mr. Gallimore, thanks. I think this is a good idea. It's going to be a whole lot more efficient, so it'll be dealt with at a more appropriate level than up here trying to answer questions at the 11th hour, so this is good.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved, 5-0. Thank you. All right, next we have a presentation about the capital improvement plan, and I'll ask Mr. Blackwelder to come up and introduce the program.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight I'll be presenting on discussion and background information that went into our capital improvement program, and also be presenting our CIP recommendations for your approval. First, let's look into the questions that go into how we come up with this plan. We looked at our Mosley space study. We analyzed their data and looked at the needs that they identified for each department. We also look at county responsibility and compliance needs, along with our ability to fund those projects for the coming years. When are we going to do this capital improvement plan? We've taken the approach that we will update and review this plan annually, providing a 5-year outlook. But keeping in mind, we have a 10-year horizon of projects to come in the future, but we don't want to show those except the first 5 years with our current. So that's how this presentation will be laid out when you get the spreadsheet later. This is just a quick overview from the presentation that you've seen last year on our capital improvement plan. These are the ones that have been completed or are currently underway. If you look at the last three there on the right-hand column, the administrative building, park demo phase 2, and park repurposing phase 1, those are the 3 projects that are currently underway. The administrative building is in the final stage of completion. with the park demo and repurposing are in the early stages. This slide right here is a precursor to the spreadsheet you'll see in the next slide. The next slide is a spreadsheet that outlays our project for the next 5 years plus the current. Those projects have a value of at least $200,000 and a life of more than 1 year, along with the county's financial responsibility in those projects. And as I said, once again, this will be the current plus 5-year outlook. Just understand that these projects and timing could be changed and amended, along with these project numbers, just estimated costs. Here's our current plus 5-year outlay on capital improvement projects. As we look at this slide, I'd like to refer back to the facility space study. Mosley identified 3 big ticket items when they presented to the board in January of 2018. They identified the detention center, human services facility, and courthouse expansion. In discussion with Mitch at Davenport, we as a county are only able to take on one of those projects in the next 5 years. That is the detention center, which you see outlaid in 2020-21 and 2022-23. Not saying that we're pushing those other 2 big ticket items to the curb. We're just taking a different approach since we're not able to fund those. In-house, we're looking at providing a facility staging plan. The staging plan will take the place of building new facilities. We will utilize space we have available to shift employees and departments in the open space we have available that will make us efficient, along with being readily available to county residents. Some of the ticket items on here I'd like to point out would be the county garage we have in here for 2019 and 20. This is something we've looked at as a county to help cut expenses and providing preventative maintenance in-house, provide quality maintenance to our fleet. If the county garage is not feasible, we do have a few other options we could look into. Right now we're utilizing a handful of different vendors across our fleet for maintenance. If we were to lose one of these vendors, we won't have a plan in place, so it doesn't strap us on services, public services. Also, we've got the public library expansion on here. That refers to a renovation to the library along with enclosing the courtyard there next to North Main Street, providing more space there. Also, we'll look at the parking lot for the park. These funds here will only be accomplished with the bond sales premiums. And we want to look at that only if we are provided premiums from the bonds. Is there any other questions or that you'd like me to go into a little more detail about some of the projects that are listed there?
Anyone have any questions?
Our next slide is refers to our public utility projects. A lot of these were seen in the 2017 presentation. Right now, the one that's weighing heavily is the East Davie sewer system. It's in the early stages. They're requiring easements. Everything will be going to bid and permitting. And if you have any questions about that, I'll turn it over to the Public Utilities Director in this section. That completes our CIP presentation. If there are any other questions pertaining to the projects, I'll be more than happy to answer them. If it's financial, I'll turn it over to Robin.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mr. Blackwater? Appreciate it.
Robin?
Good evening. As we have done in the past several years when we did the capital improvement plan, we've engaged the services of Davenport and Company. So Mitch Bergoglio is here tonight, I knew I'd float it up, to talk about the funding and financing for the CIP.
Evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I know we've all seen this presentation in a number of different areas over the last couple of years, so I'm going to keep it high level and keep it brief for y'all tonight. But a couple of points I wanted to hit on the front end of the presentation is your credit rating. You have a very good credit rating. You're rated AA2 by Moody's Investor Service and AA by Standard & Poor's. There's only 2 rating levels that are higher than your current rating. So you're starting out with a very good credit rating. When we look at your CIP, we want to understand decisions that we make and try and insulate our credit rating from going down and take advantage of areas where we may be able to improve it in the future. But the fact that you have such a good credit rating makes it reasonable for you all to be considering a CIP, and a CIP that may involve some issuance of debt in the future. Quickly on your existing debt profile, the county has about $66 million of debt outstanding. 53.5 of that is the GO bonds that we've done for the high school a couple of years ago. So most of your debt outstanding is that GO bond with the high school and a couple of smaller installment purchase contracts that have been done over the years. The county's managed its debt profile very well in a couple of different areas. You're repaying your debt in a rapid fashion. You've adopted a series of financial policies to ensure that you do maintain a strong and healthy debt profile, which supports a healthy financial profile as well. One of the other things that you all have done is you come to the table and said, if we're going to issue debt, we're going to dedicate revenues to fund that debt, and we're going to make sure those revenues are available every year moving forward, which allows you to cover a large project like the high school, but also maintain some affordability in the future for additional capital projects as you look at this CIP. So I think there's 2 key takeaways here from your existing debt profile. We talk about 2 concepts: debt capacity, which is your ability to issue debt under a series of key financial ratios, or your ability to access debt from either banks or the public markets. That's kind of determined by your debt capacity, and we'll look at some ratios for that. And then the second concept is debt affordability. Related but different. You may have the capacity to issue debt. Debt affordability is within those revenues that you've dedicated towards debt service, do you have the affordability to pay for that debt? And so you all as a county adopted 3 debt policies. The first is the 10-year payout ratio. How quickly are you repaying the principal balance outstanding? You have a policy that it will not be below 55%. You're well above that now at 70%. Debt to assessed value, you have a policy not to exceed 2.5%. Debt is a percent of your assessed value. You're currently at 1.5%, so well below your policy there. And then the last key debt ratio that you have is debt service to expenditures. Your annual debt payments as a percent of your overall budget. You all are about 13.5% right now, and you have a policy not to exceed 15%. So you're in very good shape with all your policies. Excuse me. You have debt capacity within those policies. The one sort of limiting factor going forward, or limiting consideration going forward within those policies, is going to be the debt service to expenditure policy. The other side of this is the debt affordability. And as I mentioned before, you all have dedicated a series of revenues towards the repayment of debt and towards your capital plan. And that has been a plan that was implemented in 2015 with the adoption of your initial CIP. You all and staff have been very good about sticking to the plan throughout the budget process, and that has provided you all with some debt affordability that we'll see here in a moment with the CIP. The one thing that's kind of what I would say left to do in the affordability side of these revenues is the 1 cent property tax in fiscal year 19. That was part of the plan going back to fiscal year 2015. You did the tax increase associated with the high school at the time you issued the high school bonds. Now, in fiscal 19, as you saw in the CIP, we're getting ready to gear up to do the Parks and Rec bonds, and that was the 1 penny associated with those Parks and Rec bonds that was identified. So, skip forward here to your actual CIP. Andrew showed this to you earlier. You'll note in the spreadsheet you saw a moment ago, the total was $30,042,859. The difference here is we're including in 2018 some CIP pay-go projects that you've already funded. Those projects have already been done, so they weren't included in the version of the CIP you saw earlier. But from the financial perspective, we're still in that fiscal year 18, so we wanted to account for those expenses having been paid already. So we're going to talk about over this 6-year period, 18 to 23, that's current year and the 5-year CIP outlook period. We're going to talk about a $31.7 million CIP. That's all the same projects as you looked at earlier. And when we look at funding that, we've shown $6.36 million as pay-go or cash funding from those revenues that you all have dedicated towards debt service in the CIP. So $6.36 million of cash funding, $300,000 of grant funding or bond premium funding for the parking lot at the park, and then $25 million of debt funding, $4.7 million of that being the GO bonds for the parks that are coming up this summer, $4.2 million of that associated with community college building, and then $16.1 million for the detention center. That's the one big project that you all have in your CIP that came out of the space needs study. The long and short of all of this is from those dedicated revenues, you have the affordability to pay for the CIP. You all can do this $31.7 million of CIP funding within the revenues that you've identified under that current plan. And I would say within your current budget, plus the item, the 1 penny for the Parks and Rec bonds that was part of the plan going back to 2015. So within those revenues, you have the affordability to fund the CIP. We also believe you have the capacity within your policies to fund the CIP. But the last key thing that I want to show you this evening is when we run this debt through the model, we've run a series of conservative assumptions. We've done 20-year level principal amortization for all of your debt issuance, and we've assumed a conservative 5% interest rate on the long-term 20-year bonds. When we do that, you're well in compliance with your payout ratio, well in compliance with your debt to assessed value ratio. There is a 4-year period of time after the detention center is issued that begins out in fiscal year 2024. It's a 3 to 4 year period of time where you're slightly above that debt service to expenditure policy level. That's a number of years out in the future. There's going to be a lot of things that change between now and then. Interest rates, if they come in lower, that'll affect this calculation. Depending upon how your expenditure budget and your overall budget grows, that will affect or impact this ratio. The timing of the debt issuance, when those ultimately occur, will affect this ratio. So when we look at this, from our perspective, we would say you have the capacity within your policies to take on this CIP. There is a small period of time where you could be out of compliance for a year or two. I think the important thing is you all are aware of that, you're planning for it, and there is a plan in place. If you are out of compliance for a year or two, there's a plan to quickly get back into compliance. And I think that's the important part when talking about this. So that's what I had for y'all this evening. I'm happy to answer questions. And I do think that was a record for me.
I believe it was. I think the point needs, well, when we reached out to Davenport a couple years ago and then recently, we said, okay, we do not want to raise taxes other than what's been committed for the GO bond for the park. So what can we do with an eye towards prioritization, and how much can we fund? And this is what came from that, and I appreciate the work. And but for the public, we can do this with the only tax increase as we sit here today, based on the projections, would be the 1 cent that is for the park, and which was voted on in 14. So I want to make sure everyone's clear on that. So, John, have you got any?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I know that all of you have seen this in our work groups, but just to kind of point back to what you heard a few months ago, if you recall, we had both of our consultants and experts here to talk to us about our fiscal policies as well. So not only, our utilities policies. So not only do we have sound fiscal policies that we put in place to guard against what I would say to help us navigate waters and really do what we need to do to keep our fund balance healthy. But also we've done the same from the utility perspective as well, and you heard that presentation a few months ago. From a CIP perspective today, we have both, I think, good policies in place for both our fiscal policies and utility policies. As far as the debt service to expenditures go, and I may defer to Mitch on this again, but we've had lots of conversations about that in particular, and what we're finding post-recession is it's not uncommon to hover a little bit above those if you have large-scale projects. So do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, this is not something that is unique to you all. We're seeing this across the state. I think a couple things happened in the recession that lasted a little longer than everybody wanted. There was a hesitancy to go out and do a lot of large-scale projects. Over the course of the recession, there was just a lot going on in the economy, and people tended to hold on to some of the larger projects. And as we start to come out of that economy, people are really starting to look at big projects that are needs, that maybe were needs earlier, that are getting addressed now, or maybe opportunities to address needs that didn't exist earlier. So that's one element of this. When you take on large-scale projects over a 5-year period of time, that's going to put some pressure on ratios. But specific to debt service to expenditures, another element that's a little unique that we've seen is the combination of coming out of the recession and needing to do projects that have been built up over time. But also, when we were in the recession, I think across the state, folks took a real hard look at the budgets and tried to hold the line on that budget, in some cases reduce elements of the budget. And when you're looking at debt service to expenditures, the denominator is your expenditure budget. So those expenditure budgets have been held low during the course of the recession. And so therefore, when you're looking at this calculation, you're looking at quickly addressing some large needs and over the period of a 4 to 5 year period of time against a budget that hasn't really grown, may have been reduced over the last 5 to 8 years. That tends to push these ratios up some. And again, this isn't unique to y'all. We're seeing this across the state. We're having very similar conversations with a lot of our clients. And I think again, for this debt service to expenditure policy, you have a good policy. I wouldn't necessarily recommend changing the policy right now. I think it's more important that you're aware that there's a period of time, 6, 7 years from now, that you may be out of compliance. We monitor that. We're going to be looking at the CIP on an annual basis. We're going to keep tabs on that, keep y'all posted, and I think it's important that you monitor it, recognize it, and have a plan to address it in the future. It's not, when I look at this today, it's not a major concern for your capacity from our perspective.
But you're looking at it on projections, what it's going to cost those years. I'm sure you got percentage build up in there for that too.
Yeah, we have grown the expenditure budget. We've grown the expenditure budget by, I think it's 1% a year. So, if your assessed value grows more quickly and your budget grows in line with that, that's an element of this where that'll affect this ratio. So, you don't go out of compliance until you take on the detention center project. That's in the 5th year of this 5-year outlook. So, a lot is going to change between now and then.
And when you speak of compliance, unless I'm wrong here, Mr. Chairman, this is a policy that we established, not a policy that's by statute or that the legislature established. So I think we have to be clear about that. This is our policy we're addressing, not anything that's the local government commission that is set up or.
Yes, sir. That's a great point. This is a board-adopted policy. The board has discretion with that policy, and you all have done a good job in getting in front of this and actually adopting policies. So I think, first of all, that's a credit to you all for putting the policies in place, and you're monitoring them, you're keeping an eye on them, and it's to your discretion if you allow an exemption for that policy for a period of time. And just, again, to be clear, we're not there yet. It's 2024, 2025 when that would take place.
Mr. Jones, that's an excellent point. Many counties don't have the policies we have put in place. I think this board and our staff have been very proactive in setting these policies to help us as we grow and move toward the future. So I think what you have before you today, between the prior utility presentation for capital improvements and policies you saw a few months ago, and now today, our capital improvement funding plan as well, between those policies and these projects, we feel good about those as a staff.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Bergoglio? All right, thanks for everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. All right. Next, we will move to the.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt you. It would help us if the board would take action on this capital improvement plan tonight, so we can plug that into the budget process that's coming up, if the board feels comfortable doing so. I know we talked about this in our work group.
Okay. All right. We need to vote on the capital improvement plan as it's presented. Does any other discussion? Would someone like to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion, we approve the capital expenditure plan.
Second.
Motion a second. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the capital improvement plan as presented, raise your hand. That is approved. Thank you. All right, sorry, I jumped the gun there, but we'll move on to the consent agenda. Trust everyone's had an opportunity to look at that. Any questions or observations that someone would like to share on that? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, the consent agenda is approved as presented. Right, that will take us to the county manager's report. Mr. Eller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take this opportunity to talk about all the great things happening in Davie County right now. Just an exciting time for us as we just see all the things happening that I think are really setting the stage for the future. You heard about our capital improvement plans tonight, but also you'll hear more about economic development and some planning efforts on behalf of the county. This Friday, the Chamber of Commerce is hosting the State of Davie breakfast at 7:30. You'll hear a lot of forecasts at that event as well. Just really proud of our department heads and all they're accomplishing. I mean, many of them are here tonight. If you ever notice a lot of these things that are being pushed out by departments on social media, you'll see just great things happening as far as programming our senior center and senior services programs. But also our public health departments going through their community health assessment. That's a very collaborative effort throughout the whole community. Our public safety partners are going through our CAD planning process as we look to upgrade those pieces in the future. You've heard about the great things happening as we plan for our new county park, and the Rec and Parks Advisory Board have been working hard with our director in recreation and parks there to just make that process be as seamless as possible. Our strategic plan is still moving forward, our land use development planning process, our utilities master plan, and also our economic development commission master plan. All those things are happening simultaneously. Some good synergy happening with all those pieces. We're going through our performance-based budgeting process right now with our department heads, and and really excited about that process as we also look forward to further discussion about human services consolidation at your meeting next month. I know in February in particular, as a wrap up, the tax office was very busy. We appreciate all the work that those staff have done, and if you followed a lot of stories in the media and on social media as well, you'll see how busy not only our sheriff but EMS and 911 have been just responding to several incidents in our community. So our staff are just phenomenal, and I'm very proud of them. I'm proud to be part of the team here in the county, and I thank you for letting me have the opportunity to do that. So that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, any old business to come before us this evening? Any new business?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask a question, and I'm not bringing this up under business tonight to take action on, but in terms of our county office buildings, do we allow concealed carry among our employees?
Mr. Vogler, do you want to take a stab at that, or is that?
At this time, the policy is not to. I mean,
Okay.
at this time, the policy is no firearms on county
Okay.
property,
Well,
which would include our.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. I have brought this up before, and I want to bring it up again. I believe that we should allow our county employees, and when I say this, I mean they need to be properly licensed. We do proper background checks when we hire employees, and it must be completely voluntary. But I believe that we should allow our employees that are willful and are properly trained and licensed to allow concealed carry in our county office buildings. I think gun-free zones we've seen here recently are failures. I know our previous sheriff, and I'm sure Sheriff Hartman, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I would say this, offered training to our folks. And so I say this, just Mr. Chairman, I would like to see us begin to work on a policy that would allow that. I'm not asking for any action tonight, but I would ask for action before we need action. And so I just want to bring that up, Mr. Chairman. I don't even ask for debate necessarily, but Mr. Vogler and Mr. County Manager, I would like to see us move forward in conjunction with our other partners in public safety, having that discussion.
And I've got a file folder where I had researched that several years ago,
Yeah.
when it came up back then, as far as the legality and what we can do and that sort of thing too.
Well, I appreciate us beginning to have that discussion. Maybe we could have that in some of our subcommittees and begin to bring that forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, I have one thing I would like to bring up as well. Several of the people in the Farmington area have asked about the new EMS station that we have there. The front yard to that goes out to the road and drops significantly, 5 or 6 feet almost, vertically into the side ditch. They were wondering if there's any way that we could grade that back to make it look a little bit more attractive and to be a little bit safer as well.
I'll be in contact with you, Commissioner Pointer, to talk further about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, back to your issue about the concealed, or idea about the concealed carry on our property here. How would you envision that going, getting a recommendation from the county manager, Mr. Vogler, once they've had a chance to put their heads together?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in discussion with the sheriff and, his leadership team, I think it can be done. It's done all over the country. I just think we need to add that level of safety, and I'm not asking to arm every employee. I'm just saying those that are properly licensed, they all have proper background checks and want to. I think it brings that question into the minds of people that might want to come in here and do harm, though it's never happened. Times are changing. So yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that's.
All right, any other new business? All right, seeing none, we will move to Commissioners' comments. Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, all I want to do is just thank the good citizens of Davie County who make this a great place to live. It's just, John alluded to it, it's just a wonderful place to live. And baseball season starting, there's several hundred kids down at Little League, and it's just a fun place to be and raise a family. I want to thank all of our employees, especially many of them up here tonight that work so hard for our community. They have servants' hearts, and I really appreciate them, and as I know we all do. And as I did earlier, I'd like to thank God for this great nation and this great group of people that we call our neighbors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wise,
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I mean, our staff is just, you see what we put up and through our, projects and stuff, and they've done an outstanding job on the numbers and everything, and just to see the support that our staff gives us. I mean, we got more staff here tonight, we have visitors, so I mean, that's just accreditation to them, and we appreciate that. And just like to thank everybody for coming. And if you run out of anything to pray for this week, just pray for me, as I'll be having my right knee replaced on Friday. And then as soon as it's well enough, we're going to have the left one done. So we've got a heavy spring coming up with the medical bills. So just pray for me that everything goes good, and we'll be back up and going as soon as possible.
Mr. Poindexter.
I too would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, even those that have already gone. I know Davie County is a rapidly changing place these days, especially as viewed through our capital improvement plan that was presented tonight. And I'd just like to thank staff for staying on top of that and keeping us informed ahead of time so that we don't run into anything unexpected. And I'd like to say thank you to all the employees who are so dedicated and do such a wonderful job. Thank you.
I would also echo what everyone said about thanking the employees and the staff. I think that's very, very important. And I would also say, as you saw the capital expenditure plan tonight, hopefully you're starting to see a little of that come to fruition. The courthouse, has been renovated on the outside a little bit. There's been some work done down at the Brock Center. There's some things, I think, done at some of the obviously the new school, but there's been other things done at the school. The park, the old school area, that's starting to take shape, demolition down there. So things are starting to happen in this county. And fortunately, we have not had to raise taxes any more than what we had to do for the new school and what we're going to deal with the park. So there is some things happening, and we're trying to manage everyone's money the very best we can. It's kind of like our own money. You only got so much, and you can only do so many things, but you can leverage some of it by doing some of the things we're doing with this capital expenditure plan. And again, thank everybody for coming out tonight. And as I've said before, there's a few people that watch us on TV. I want to thank them for watching us also. Thank you.
Thank everyone for being here. Mr. Wisecarver said, I think we got more employees here tonight than we do residents, so thank you. Next month, if you're making plans to attend, we won't be starting at 6, it'll be at 7, so if you get here at 6, you'll be early. We have the report to the people next month with the agricultural extension, so we'll be over there before we come here at 7, so please make that note. With that, appreciate you being here and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
Have a second. All in favor? We are adjourned.